Welcome everyone to our very special event today. I am right here in the kitchen of Sip and Savor restaurant here in Las Vegas for this edition of Cook Like a Rebel. My name is Aniela, and I am a 1999 graduate of the Harrah College of Hospitality and a current board member of our Alumni Association. Today, for our food portion of the event, Cook Like a Rebel, Chef Mark Wilson will be cooking a traditional Irish dish, which is quite a treat for us because Chef Mark is actually a classically French trained chef. He started cooking at the age of 19 and is a native of New Zealand. He's a graduate of Otago University in New Zealand. And after graduating, has worked all over the world, literally all over the world. He's worked in Australia, Germany, at London's Royal Garden Hotel, the New York's Waldorf Astoria, as well as in Paris for the world-renowned chef Alain Ducasse at his 3 Michelin star restaurant at the 5-star Palace Hotel. After that, he worked at Royal Caribbean, where for 10 years, he was an executive chef at sea, including on 3 of the largest cruise ships in the world, before he became the corporate executive chef for the entire fleet of Royal Caribbean ships. So this is a chef who's literally been all over the world, landed right here in Las Vegas, and I'm in his kitchen right now. We are so excited to get to know his version of this Irish dish for Shamrock Shenanigans Cook Like a Rebel. So right now, I'll turn it over to Chef Mark, and we'll get started on the Shamrocks and Shenanigans Cook Like a Rebel portion. Chef Mark, take it away.
Cheers. Hey guys, how you doing? So what I'm going to start with is kind of a traditional classical dish. Corned beef is a very Irish cut of meat. It's brinded usually for a couple of days, and then I braise it and sear it. So it's a wee bit outside the traditional. We got a couple of traditional potato dish, traditional gaelic sauce, and brussel sprouts as well. First of all, what we need to start it on is with cooking. It's most important is the timing. You know, you got to get the sequence in the right order so everything comes up on time, hot and ready to go. So having said that, I got some potatoes on the stove. Obviously for the mashed potatoes, I'm going to turn those on. All I need to do with that is peel them, cut them in half, and salt. Never be shy with the salt in the water. I'm also going to put some water on for the tomato concasse, which goes in the sauce. All right, so tomato concasse is it's a way to peel the tomato and then to seed it and dice it. So pretty much most of that way is used for any kind of sauce, especially in Italy. The seeds have a little bit too much acidity. And the skin also is the texture. So you remove the skin and then you take out the seeds, and it's more difficult, more work, but it's a lot better product in the end. So we got the potatoes on, the water's on for the concasse. All right, now we're going to start. I need to start with the beef. First of all, pretty much anything braising always has a Mirepoix in it. So basically, it's mostly root vegetables. What this does is it clarifies the stock, and it also flavors it. So the beef has a bit more flavor, and also the beef has something to sit on the bottom of it, so it doesn't burn. So you don't want the piece of beef touching the pot or the braising pan or whatever you want to do. So you put the Mirepoix down the bottom, you put the beef on, and then you put the stock. The stock gives it moisture, especially in braising. So usually when you cook for a long time, you need a lot of moisture. Otherwise the product, wherever it is, whether it be lamb, beef, pork, whatever you're braising, needs that additional moisture to protect the beef.
It seems like I think they may be having some internet issues over at Sip and Savor. So, Mark, Mark Steele, I think we're going to toss it over to you. Yes.
Always a bridemaid and never the bride, but here.
Oh no!
You're back up, so. All right, so I'll just head on through, and if they jump on, Candace, I'll let you take lead for what we're going to do beyond that. So hello everyone. My name is Mark Steele. I am the owner and founder of the Restaurant Hospitality Institute. What we are is we're a food server aptitude course or training school, actually, that's actually right down the road from you on Tropicana, close to Spencer. We train front of the house aptitude. We train food servers, sommeliers, hostesses, busboys. We are we're approved by the Commission on Post-Secondary Education. And we also are approved to be able to do training and rehabilitation for Nevada Workforce Connections. Here's actually our logo and our name and our website. We invite you to come and check us out at rhinstitute.com. So of course, part of our program is a lot of alcohol. I am personally a certified beer sommelier, a cicerone. I am a wine sommelier and actually a sake sommelier, which you might have seen my Art of Sake presentation a few months back. But today we're actually going to talk about Irish beverages. As you might have already known when you were signing up, that we're going to talk a little bit about some Irish whiskey, and we're going to talk about Irish stout. So I do have a presentation all ready to go. So let me go ahead and share that screen right there. There we go. Okay, so here I am, RHI, Restaurant Hospitality Institute. And, you know, I know the name of this event is always Salute, Prost, Cheers, but we're going to add an extra word this time for it's the word right there that looks spelled kind of awkwardly. It looks like sliante is actually pronounced slancha in Gaelic. So that actually means health. So basically that's a toast that you have to your health whenever you're drinking in Ireland. All right. I actually did a whiskey tasting as portion of RHI, a branch, a few months ago, and I have some pictures right there, and you can see myself very happy with a bottle of Jameson Stout Edition and a stout that was aged in Jameson barrels. So that was pretty amazing to have those two as well, side by side. And then on the right, I have a picture of some random people, some Guinness brewmasters from back in the day, the 1950s. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, of what the relation to that is too when we start talking about Guinness. So in general, let's talk about whiskey. So what is whiskey? If we're going to talk about Irish whiskey, we got to start with the bases. So generally speaking, whiskey is as simple as an explanation as it's distilled beer. So, you know, you make the beer, standard protocol, and then you distill it. So basically you basically heat it up to where a lot of water goes away, and it makes the beer higher in alcohol, and you know, just with same flavors to it, but just a little bit more intense. Most beer you're going to find, which we're going to talk about, the Irish stouts, are about 4.5% to 5%, as opposed to some of the whiskeys. And Irish whiskeys have to be a minimum of 40%. So that's a high variance. So that tells you how much actually cooks off from the beer to making the whiskey process. So just like beer, the base product, quality, unique techniques, cultural processes, and aging makes totally diverse results. So all the beer that you have from all around the world, different ingredients, different water, different aging techniques, different cultural things, they all make a different beer. So this goes exactly the same for whiskey. So there's a lot of different types of whiskey. So don't let it confuse you. In general, there's more similarities than there are in the whiskeys than there are in differences. So if you've heard of Scotch before, Scotch is actually a whiskey. We're talking about Irish whiskey today. Bourbon is designated a whiskey as well. We have Tennessee whiskey, which is like your Jack Daniels, which we spoke about in one of our first sessions. We have Canadian whiskey, and a big up-and-comer is a Japanese whiskey. So those are kind of all the different whiskeys that you have. So let's talk about Irish whiskey in general. So let's talk about, so the word comes from the Gaelic, Ishka Baha. So that in essence means a water of life. So when they were actually originally brewing this stuff, you know, they cooked down this beer, and whatever was left over, they were calling the water of life, because it was just in essence a spirit, and that's what they called it. So over the years, the Irish equivalent morphed to Fuishka, which is spelled a lot differently than you might say it. And now that's kind of more whisky across the way to whiskey. So Irish whiskey, I'm here to tell you, was once the most popular spirit in the entire world. Though a long period of decline in the late 19th century onwards, greatly damaging the industry, so much so that Ireland only boasted about 30 distilleries in the 1890s. And then a century later, which is maybe, the 1990s, this number had fallen all the way to 3. So it took a big dip from being the #1 spirit in the whole world to all of a sudden it went down, and there was a lot of different reasons, war, Ireland just kind of being by itself, England, who was their main importer of the stuff, had a lot of similar rules and issues like us with prohibition. So that really damaged the industry for Irish whiskey. However, here we are today. So it's actually booming and it's actually doing very well. So Irish whiskey has seen a resurgence in popularity since the late 20th century and has been the fastest growing spirit in the world every year since that 1990. So we were all the way down to 3, so nowhere to go to up. And it's been the most popular growing spirit since then. And think about it, Jameson is a standard across the board, and we like to drink it as shots or Jameson and ginger. So that's had a big part of its resurgence over the years. So the export's growing over 15% per year. Existing distilleries have been expanded and several new distilleries constructed. So, a lot of the distilleries that closed down, they reopened, but they said, this wasn't even enough for the demand. So there's been opening a lot more. But as of December 2019, Ireland has 32 distilleries in operation, with more planned or under development as we speak. So, 130 years ago, it was at 30, like we just said, and went down to 3. Now we're up to 32 again. So here's kind of what, this is what Ireland looks like. We're actually going to be tasting some Tullamore Dew, which you can read right here, is right in the center. So, a lot of the water that comes from it has a lot more minerals from it because it has some underground sources and going through a lot of ground. But we're going to be also talking about, and let me show you in relation to Dublin, which is right over here on the East Coast, right centrally located, to where the water is a lot more industrial and it's a lot harder and it has a lot more alkaline to it. So, that's kind of the water is a big factor in any kind of alcohol that you have, whether it be beer or whiskey or vodka, obviously. So, that just is kind of an identifier. Like I said, the whiskey that we're having, Tullamore Dew, is from right from the center, but Dublin, where Guinness is from, is right on the coast. So they get ocean water and ocean breeze, but they also get a lot of alkaline and minerality from their water as well. So here are some regulations that they have to follow. So, Irish whiskey is not just, just bottle it up and throw it in there. Every basically alcohol has its own regulations and own rules that they have to go by. So Irish whiskey must be distilled and matured on the island of Ireland. Duh. So it's comprising with the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland from a mash of malted cereals with or without whole grains or other cereals, and which has been either A, fermented by the action of yeast, which is standard for fermentation, distilled at an alcoholic strength of less than 94.8% alcohol by volume in such a way that the distillate has an aroma and taste derived from the materials used, and only plain water and caramel color is added to it. So 94.8% is pretty beefy. I don't know how high you can get like that, but we'll talk about what the minimums are, but that's the maximum to be Irish whiskey. It's subject to the maturation of final distillate for not at least 3 years in wooden casks, such as oak, and not exceeding 700 liters capacity. So in addition, it needs to be aged for minimum 3 years. So next time you're doing the shot of Jameson, just think of how long it's taken to just get you to that path, at least age for 3 years. Then it's got to retain the color, aroma, and taste derived from the production process referred to as above, and it needs to have a minimum alcohol by volume of 40%. So, that's 80 proof. That's pretty much standard for most spirits, but, look at the high range of what it has to be. It has to be between 40% and 94.8%. So there's a lot of wiggle room in there. So the guidelines aren't as stringent as you might think. So let's look at a label of Irish whiskey. Any age statement must refer to the age of the youngest whiskey used. So any Irish whiskey that you'll ever get, if you look at the bottle and it says, it's 5 years old or it's 10 years old, or there's even there's some Irish whiskeys, Redbreast, I believe is 15 and 20 and 25 years old. That means it's the youngest, that's the youngest whiskey of the blend inside there. So attritionally, it's spelled with E, so Irish whiskey. So whenever you see a bottle of Irish whiskey, that's how a lot of determining factors, as you can tell it's from Ireland, is they'll actually put a E in there for the determining for whiskey, where a lot of Scotch doesn't have the E to it. The term single is permissible only if the whiskey is totally distilled on the site of a single distillery. So, a lot of Irish whiskey and Scotches, which we're going to talk about, are blends from all over the place, and they try to make as consistent of a product as they can. That's, part of marketing, and that's part of the way that you market your product, is make sure you have a consistent thing from year to year. You can have Jameson taste different from year to year, but the ingredients and the weather and the water are different. So they have to do blends from different areas to make sure that their whiskey is consistent, or else people will stop buying the product if they're not sure what they're getting in the bottle. However, if you see the term single on there, it means that it's totally distilled on the site from a single distillery. So that's no easy task. So spirit drinks must be labeled, packages sold, advertised, promoted in such a way to suggest they are Irish whiskeys. So that's basically just reading a bottle on that as well. You can tell it's an Irish whiskey. All right, so let's talk about the difference between Irish whiskey and Scotch whiskey, because they're right next to each other, and they have more similarities and they do differences. So Irish whiskey, obviously made in Ireland, it's spelled with an E. It's known for being a little bit more of a smoother finish, maybe almost a little aftertones of sweetness to it as well, which we're going to go over with a tasting. It's made from unmalted barley, which means that they actually haven't taken it and soaked it in water prior. So it's basically barley that's just taken up. So it's a lot harder, and the sugars, it takes a lot harder to come out of. It's normally triple distilled, and it uses other grains besides barley. So Scotch, on the other hand, it's made in Scotland, of course. It's spelled without an E, and those who had Scotch before and maybe Irish whiskey side by side, it is very smoky. And a lot of it comes from the peating, of which we have a picture right down there. Peat is basically some moss that grows really well, or it's indigenous to Scotland. And you can see a picture, it's just a bunch of kind of dirt that has some moss and mold all growing within it. And that's actually used, and they take that and they cook it up and they smoke it. And so that's why you have a lot of the smoky flavors when it comes to Scotch. It's normally just double distilled, and it's typically only using barley. All right, so today we're going to be tasting some Tullamore Dew, and I actually put some, I know the chef is going to be making some food later, but I put some pictures up of some of the food pairings that we might go with. So we have started with the Tullamore Dew here, and I thought it was interesting, and we use this because I'm very familiar with the product. We could use Jameson or some other stuff, but Tullamore Dew is kind of the next tier down from popularity. And for Jameson, if you see this is very, very well made. So it's the original triple distilled, triple blend whiskey. And if we just remember to our last slide, that it needs to be triple distilled to begin with. And it's known for its smooth and gentle complexity. So if you look at the dew on the bottom, you actually see that there's periods behind it, because it's actually an acronym, DEW. So when it first opened up, I believe in the mid 1700s, the distillery, it was a Tullamore distillery, and it was right in the center part of Ireland. And the family that bought it and operated, owned it for about 2 generations. And I think the second or third generation, they didn't want to really run it. They didn't want to run the family business. So they hired someone, and his name was Daniel E. Williams. They hired him, and he was a bookkeeper. He ended up being their general manager, and he ended up making such a great impact for their sales and for the taste that they actually changed the name from the Tullamore Irish whiskey to Tullamore Dew, and the DEW are his initials and his acronym. So the man who basically, he decided that it's going to be a true craft, could only come from this true character, and insisted that his whiskey be made accordingly, so much so that they are, using his name on the bottle to this date. So You know, if you've joined one of these events with me before, you know, it's not just about talking about the history and the fun and tasting it, but you know, it's about creating a bond with your customer, no matter what you're here studying at UNLV or if you graduated already. You know, always alcohol is great to have with groups of people, and it's always great to share some interesting facts. And you know, I mean, that's what you're drinking it for, is to have fun with your friends and to talk about things. So, you know, we bring along some drunken facts to this stuff, and stuff that you can, you know, kind of shout out whenever you're talking to your bar and hanging out and drinking the stuff. So, you know, we are going to kind of go through the process here, and we'll have some fun facts about this stuff too. So we have a bottle. It's a fresh bottle here. We're going to open it up, and glassware is very important. Traditionally, you know, I know we drink a lot of Jameson and ginger, but they and we'll drink it with, you know, with shots, but they actually use it as a sipping drink. You know, it's very cold outside. Ireland's not known for having tropical weather. It's known for being you know, rainy and cold. So, you know, nothing better than after a long day of work or being outside is to come in and have a nice sip of this Jameson served at room temperature. Because even though it's just room temperature, you know, it's going to be a little bit colder than our room temperature. It's just going to warm up your body. So, you know, I suggest, you know, a nice stem glass like this. You can use this. Or also, you know, just a standard rocks glass, and this is something that you can just continue to just to drink out of and pour. So we're going to use our stemmed glass here because it's got a bigger, you know, opening to be able to smell it. So I'm going to go ahead and pour myself a little bit right now.
Mark, I have a question for you.
Yes.
Albert would like to know if you can explain why a single barrel is typically much smoother.
Well, because I mean, it's we can just use some logic on that and just say that single barrel I mean, the word smooth is always a relative thing. So we can just kind of say that right now, but you know, a single barrel is something that when someone puts on a bottle of Irish whiskey and they put single barrel on there, now they've kind of determined, hey, you know what, this is the top that we make. It's been crafted. It's been watched a lot more. And the barrels, you know, they're used in a lot of rotation, but you know, when you say single barrel on it, it's kind of like their high end, the upper end stuff. So it better be the best that they have to offer. And they're not using it to make it consistent for year and year, that this person, the crafter of the whiskey, is actually paying special attention to this one single barrel. So, you know, again, smooth is a very relative term, but, you know, maybe it's definitely going to be a better quality because it's more crafted and it's more it's more watched, and it's not blended with anything else.
Great, thank you.
Okay. All right. So, you know, we have poured ourselves a little bit of the Tullamore Dew right here. So we look at it, it's got a real nice kind of caramel color to it, but you can still see through it. So let's go ahead and smell it. And this is at 40%. So this is on the low end of their scale. But, you know, you can smell it and you can still kind of smell the alcohol, but it's still kind of disguised with some semi-fruity notes and very biscuity. And that comes from the yeast that's added. There are gristly notes with caramel and toffee sweetness, and then plenty of peels. And normally when people talk about, you know, peels in any kind of alcohol, it's your citrus peels. So, you know, we'll get some kind of like some charred citrus peels in here, some charred orange peels, but it smells pretty delicious to me. So, so we'll go ahead and taste it. And for those of you who are tasting along, it's got some good body. It's sitting right on the tongue. It immediately warms me up. It's kind of burning a little bit in the back of my palate, and that comes from the alcohol coming through. But it's just nice and warming and pleasant. And it kind of gets your, you know, with that burning in the back, it kind of gets your taste buds going a bit. And whiskey is generally known for, you know, for eating it, for drinking it with food, but Irish whiskey is really known for, you know, after a long day of work and it's cold outside, you're having some Irish whiskey, you're going to have some stew or some cheese, something along with it. But, you know, it's making my tongue salivating as we speak. I wish I was in the kitchen with Mark over there to try some of his food. So, but it's good body with notes of sherried peels. So it means in general, it's a little bit oxidized, because that sherry is generally, when you hear that term, it's an oxidized sense of what it's trying to display. And with spice, toast, butter, and definitely some honey. I get some honey on the tongue, and with some vanilla cream. So, with the sherry comes a little bit of a oxidized cream taste to it, and it is kind of creamy on my palate, and for those of you who are having it as well. So the finish, of course, is it's still sitting on my tongue, and it's very vegetal as well. And, that helps go along with some of the food pairings that we have, because most of the dishes, what do you think of when you think of Irish food? You think of cabbage and corned beef and potatoes, but you think of a lot of cabbage, and you think of a lot of herbs, and you think a lot of potatoes. And that's why this goes very well with those items. And I've heard that if you've actually had those dishes in Ireland and drink it with this, like the synergy from the same farm or the same area is unbelievable, because in essence the barley is coming from the ground, the same place that is growing the starchy potatoes and the cabbage. So it makes sense that it's all on the same farm, and it's all growing in the same place, that it should definitely have some good synergy to go together. So food pairing, corned beef and cabbage, obviously, and it's kind of got the same body to it. And I'm going to use something that I use in almost all my classes. And this is one of the general rules for food and for wine pairings or alcohol pairings, that in general, if it grows together, that it goes together. And, Irish whiskey, corned beef and cabbage, there's a reason why they make the two to go together. And this is the reason why. So if you have a little bit of this and you haven't drank it all yet, save some when you have the corned beef and cabbage, and have them side by side. You're really going to enjoy yourself. Always when you're making a pairing of alcohol and food, you always want to include a cheese component, because cheese is so diverse as well. And cheese also, comes ultimately from a cow and from enzymes. So, and what is that cow eating? That cow is eating the same earth and the same grass that the barley and the cabbage are coming from. So, cheese is always a good idea when you talk about food and any kind of alcohol pairing. Cheese should always be one of your thoughts that you have. And no accident, this goes with an Irish white cheddar, of which we have the picture of right there. And, I have the picture of that, but I actually have some real, believe it or not, it actually goes really, really well with dark chocolate. And they make a lot of dark chocolate over in Ireland, and so it's no secret that it goes well. So I'm sorry we didn't put this on the prep list, but I'm going to have to enjoy this in front of you guys right now. But if you have some dark chocolate and some Irish whiskey, go ahead and give it a try, because it's got, again, we talked about those sherry creamy overtones, but it's nice and robust. So it definitely goes with some chocolate. So. And again, the Irish whiskey is strong, it's powerful, the same kind of characteristics as dark chocolate. If you took milk chocolate or white chocolate, would not go as well with the Irish whiskey, because whiskey is known for being robust in general. For those of us who are not real, heavy Irish whiskey drinkers, if it might be a little bit too strong, one thing that I've learned recently, actually on the when I did the Irish whiskey tasting that I showed you pictures of, is someone literally just came back from Ireland, and he went to a bunch of, distilleries and brought back some bottles with us. Is one thing that I didn't know is that it's pretty standard over there for those who are not aggressive drinkers and sit there and drinking all day long, that you actually want to combine it with a sparkling lemonade. So I actually have a little bit here. We'll pop the top. And for those who want to try Irish whiskey, but think it's maybe a little bit too aggressive for them, that's fine. So in essence, they'll pour themselves a nice glass of Irish whiskey, and they'll just keep on topping themselves off. So they get that nice burn to start out with, because it's so condensed, but they'll just keep on filling it. And before you know it, their glass and their sparkling lemonade will both be gone, and they'll be asking for another one. So sparkling lemonade and Irish whiskey are kind of two peas a pod over in Ireland when you don't want to go aggressively just for with Irish whiskey. And I can confirm that's a pretty amazing combination right there. All right, so that's Irish whiskey. Now we're going to talk about beer, and we're going to talk about Irish Stout. Okay, so we're going to have some Guinness today, which is the most popular Irish Stout, but I just want to give a little bit of history about Irish Stout in general. So pretty much all beer that you have anywhere will relate somewhere, will come back somewhere to somewhere in the old world, whether it be Amsterdam, whether it would be Germany, and obviously a lot of tradition from England as well. So the original style is called a porter, which I'm sure a lot of you have heard before, which is a dark, rich, deep colored porter. And the reason why they called porters in the 1700s, I'm sorry, they called them porters because what they did is this was a dark, deep beer, and we're going to go through the tasting in a little bit, but it had overtones of chocolate and coffee, and it was really warmed you up, even though the alcohol was kind of low in there. And the reason why they did that is because the porters, there was no real transportation besides going up the Thames River, except for going from boat to boat to cross the river. And the porters were the actual people who were the ones who were deemed to, that was their job to go back and forth. So all day long, they were just transporting people back and forth, getting to work, getting home, just doing whatever tasks they need to do. And of course, they're outside all day long. And again, London is not known for being a tropical weather environment. It's very, dark, gloomy, rainy, cold. So after these guys get off of work, just like we all do, they want to go have a drink. So they would go to the closest pub and they would have this dark beer. And the dark beer, had those flavors of coffee and roasty and charcoaly. And as soon as you drank that, that just kind of warmed up your system. So, and they didn't serve them as cold as we do nowadays. There was not even any refrigeration. So a lot of these were served at room temperature. So these guys got off of work, and that's where you got the name porter from. Stout. So stout is a term that basically back in those days meant it was a generic term for stronger. So if something was stout, it was a lot stronger. And so they didn't have a lot of, not like the diversity that we do nowadays, that if I'm going to make a beer, if we're going to make a beer, in downtown Las Vegas with one of the breweries, we have access to ingredients and yeast and water from the entire world at our fingertips, and we can make any kind of beer that we want to. However, back then when they were making beers in London, they had very, very, very few options. So the only thing that they had to do was actually make one of their options a little bit differently. So they took the barley and they started roasting it. So they had different levels of roast. So when you have an Irish stout, it's all about the robust. And this was, stout meant a stronger beer because it was strongest in the totem pole as far as roastedness for the barley. And you can see a picture right there. So originally it wasn't made in mass production. It was made in casks. So they would make the beer and they would put it in cask and put it behind the bar, just like you would think. A cask like this, a sideways barrel, and you would just pour it like that. So the only carbonation that was in there was the natural carbonation that was happening. But since it was going away and not really stuck in the beer, the carbonation was very, very low for the stout. Obviously, they started making it in Ireland, and then they dropped the name porter afterwards, and then that's when the stout term started becoming just predominant because they moved over there and they dropped the porter and then they made it their own style. So it's heavy in roasted barley and malt. Again, it was originally in cask and recycled bottles. So not everybody can go to the bar. Some people wanted to drink out of the recycled bottles. So the CO2 was really, really low. But then in the 1950s, when mass production was starting to become a thing, they needed to duplicate this process to make sure that there was carbonation in the beer. However, from the draft system and from CO2 that was happening in the bottles, this CO2 was just completely destroying the beer. It was making it too bitter. So, you can imagine with the coffee and the charcoal was already kind of bitter already to begin with. Now with the CO2, it wasn't giving you the right component that it was meant to do. So there was in the 1950s, there was a gentleman named Michael Ash, which we have a picture of him right there, who was a mathematician and a brewer, which seems to me like a pretty good combination of jobs. And he invented a nitro draft system that he started putting out in lieu of the CO2 because the Irish stout wasn't tasting correctly, wasn't pouring correctly. So he invented this. But it's still a component with a little bit of CO2 and 70% nitro in there. So in general, it just makes a less bitter beer and it makes a creamy head. One thing that I will say, and I'm going to share a little bit about my family history. I believe my dad's actually watching today. But he shared a story with me that he spent his summers in Ireland, and he worked at our great grandfather's pub, and one of his first jobs during the summer was actually taking these recycled bottles and taking them out to the stream. And there was really not a lot of real formatted sanitation, and he would wash out the bottles and bring them right back to the brewery and right back to the pub, and they would refill them out and just like that. So that's a little bit of fun history. So let's talk about Guinness Irish Stout. So it was originated in the brewery of Arthur Guinness at St. James Gate, Dublin, Ireland in 1759 on the 31st. So here's an interesting fact that when he signed it, he signed a 9,000-year lease from a defunct brewery in 1759. And he basically signed it for 45 pounds per year and took over the unused brewery. So he signed a 9,000-year lease. They're still paying the same price of $45 a year. So I think 45 pounds a year. So I think that's right around $60, $65. So I'm sure that had a lot to do with their success, that their overhead was so low to begin with. So it's one of the most successful alcohol brands in the entire world, and it's brewed in 50 different countries and available in over 120 countries. Sales in 2011 amounted to, 220 million US gallons, and it is popular with the Irish, both in Ireland and abroad. And I'm pretty sure with St. Patrick's Day just being a couple days ago, that quite a few of you that I'm speaking to probably had a couple Guinnesses and maybe even had too many and still smell like it with the Irish whiskey. Anyway, I digress. So it's still the best-selling alcoholic drink in Ireland, where Guinness and Company Brewery makes almost 2 billion pounds worth of beer annually. All right. So I'm going to show you that picture again that we looked on the first slide. So you see two gentlemen. This is a newspaper clipping that I was lucky enough that my father helped me facilitate. You have the two gentlemen there, Brendan Murphy and Joseph O'Meara. My father says that we're actually related to both, but the gentleman, Joseph O'Meara, drinking the beer on the right-hand side, you can see they're working very hard over there being master brewers in the tasting room, but that's actually my great grandfather. So my grandmother was Irish on that side, and so my great-grandfather was a master brewer of Guinness. So that's exciting. He didn't sadly pass down any, and he owned a couple pubs too, and sadly he didn't pass down any of the secret recipes, but it's cool to have that family history, which makes me a fourth-generation food and beverage specialist. So, all right, so let's talk about Guinness. So again, I put some pictures of some food up there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of pull out a glass and actually pour a glass right now. So those who have actually seen a Guinness being poured before, it should be served in a glass like this. Not quite a pint glass, not quite a tulip glass. They actually call it a tulip pint, to where it's straight on the bottom. It curves out on both sides. It's a little bit different than a Pilsner glass or a Hefeweizen glass, to where it curves in and goes back outside. That this needs to be flat on the bottom and opens up. And the reason why is, I'm going to show you why, is they've actually, with technology nowadays, that you might actually have a Guinness and it might sound like there's something bouncing around in there, like a pinball or something like that, but there's actually a small little ball in there, not big enough to play beer pong or anything like that, but it helps with the nitrous that's actually happening in here. So if we open it up, oh, this one's actually really going. So this is a one beer, and I would not ever suggest pouring out the whole beer into a glass whenever you have a nice cold can or a bottle, but this is actually one of the beers that you actually want to do this. So we're going to pour it out, and I want you to kind of see everything that's going on, because this has a really, really unique process. This is also something that you want to pour right in the center of the beer. It's not something, a lot of beers you pour on the side of the glass. This is something you want to pour right in the center. And as opposed to a lot of other different beers, the carbonation and the CO2 normally goes up. Guinness, if you're looking at it, where are the bubbles going? The bubbles are actually going down. So why the heck does that happen? So it happens because the nitrous, basically when you put it in the center, so the carbonation is coming up through the center and goes out on the outside. So that's why the glass is designed like this. So on the bottom, there's not a lot of activity, but it goes up and goes around. So that's why, and it forms all the bubbles. It almost looks like a foamy, creamy head on the top, which it actually is, but it's just a combination of really, 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 really small bubbles. So traditionally you want to let it set down. If you're actually pouring a beer, the next slide will actually talk about how long you should actually do it, because there's an art to do it. But you can see that it takes a while to kind of settle, because you don't want to drink it while everything is going on. You want it to settle and sit and just kind of let it be. And, you know, it's very easy drinking. It's pretty low in alcohol nowadays. I think it's about 4.5%, which is lower than a lot of, IPAs or Belgian beers that are close to double digits nowadays. And this is something that you can drink a lot of. It looks very heavy and very thick, but it's just got a lot of roasted flavors to it. So we're going to go ahead and smell it. So it's kind of sweet with the hints of malt breaking through, because this is all about the roasted malt and the roasted barley. Let's go ahead and taste it. I think, as it says right there, malty sweetness with a hoppy bitterness. These beers aren't really about hops, but every beer by definition has a little bit of hops in there. And it has notes of coffee and chocolate for sure, which is all over my palate right now. And I'm going to guess that this is going to go pretty well with this chocolate too. I'll taste that later. A roasted chocolate flavor also comes through, courtesy of the roasted unmalted barley that goes into the brewing. So we talked about Irish whiskey before as unmalted barley. It's the same thing that they do and they make with the process of Guinness right now. And the finish is smooth, creamy, and balanced. And it's totally all kinds of different flavors going on right now. And it's velvety. It's got a nice velvety mouthfeel, which you would expect from the nice creamy head that goes on the top. All right, so as you can imagine, food pairings, again, if it grows together, it goes together. And if it looks like it should go together, it normally should as well. So this goes really well with some nice shepherd's pie, which we have a picture right over there, Irish lamb stew. And something that you might find a little bit interesting is this actually goes really well with oysters. And the reason why is because Dublin has such a high intensity of the water source, has some a high alkaline component to it, and so do oysters. So that goes really, really well together. And plus, you know, a lot of oysters back in the day, they didn't have the access to proteins like we do now. So some of the only proteins that people could eat in the 1700s or 1800s were actually going into the rivers themselves and finding the oysters. And so, you know, that naturally just kind of fit together with the beer. And of course, you know, we got to talk about a cheese, a nice cheddar cheese. This go really well with, even though Guinness isn't really known for having, going with cheese. And in general, you know, this is what we kind of call a patio crusher, because even though it looks heavy, it's nice and light. That you can have a bunch of these and hanging out. You probably did it on St. Patrick's Day. And so, you know, calling it a patio crusher, what else do you do on a patio? You have some nice barbecued food. So some grilled, a grilled hamburger or a grilled lamb burger with some cheddar cheese over top of it with a nice brioche bun. That would probably be a match made in heaven to go along with this. And we're going to leave you with some drunk facts, because in my research of Guinness, we found some cool things that I really wanted to share with you, and I couldn't remember them all, so I just wanted to put them all on a sheet. So the original Guinness brewery lease runs out in the year 10759, and they're paying $60 a year. So let's hope with that overhead that you're making money with that. So, and the Guinness Book of World Record, you know, it's actually named after Guinness beer because it was inspired by an argument in a pub of a couple guys who were actually drinking Guinness at a pub that specializes in Guinness. Arthur Guinness, who was the founder of Guinness, has 21 children. So good thing that he signed a very inexpensive lease because he had to take care of all the kids. And so pouring Guinness is a 6-step art form from the draft that involves a 1 minute and almost 2 minute second break in between to kind of let everything settle. From the beer, it goes from the can, it goes a little bit better, but actually from the draft, you need to let it sit for a couple minutes. And ironically, 2 of the top 5 Guinness consuming countries are in Africa. that apparently, this is something I didn't even know until a couple nights ago doing research, is that Africa, in Nigeria and Cameroon, are two of the top 5 selling Guinness countries in the entire world, which I found that very, very mind-blowing a little bit, that they drink it all the way down there in the hot weather, but it's not a really heavy beer. And it can be drinking without a lot of, it doesn't need to be really cold. You want to drink it probably about 45 to 50 degrees, not at the cold temperature of most draft beers that you're going to find, in your local pub down the road or your local bar. And and I found this really funny, more than 1,600 pints of Guinness are lost every year in facial hair. So with the creamy, texture and all that's going on, that when you actually drink it, those who have facial hair, of which I have a little bit, but I'm not going to lose any on here, that 1,600 pints of Guinness are lost every year. Don't ask me how they determine that, but that was a fun fact that I knew. And for all my vegetarians out there, that Guinness is actually vegan, that they actually, there's a process that some breweries use where they actually put some fish component in there as the last, kind of filtering process to get all the rest of the impurities out. It attaches to this fish oil or fish component that you put in there, that Guinness changed about 5 years ago. So now they are completely vegan. So that wraps everything up. If you have any questions, please let me know. So again, sláinte. And, if you're having a Guinness, please enjoy it and save some with Irish whiskey for that. So are there any additional questions, Candace?
Are there any questions from Mark? I have not seen any others come through.
Awesome.
Just
so
yet.
Yeah, check out our website. And those of you guys who are in the business, we do alcohol awareness cards. We're right down the road from you. We're all up and operational. And check out our website, see everything that we do. And we do beer classes and wine classes. And we even did a sake class last week. So, I've been helping out Murray with some of his things, and hopefully you'll see us again. So thanks for having me.
See if there are any other questions coming through. I don't see anything just yet. That's always a good sign, Mark, when there are no questions. It means you did a really good job of explaining everything.
I bored everyone.
I don't think so. I think that was really interesting. I mean, a lot of the comments that we were getting throughout your presentation were about how interesting it was and all the fun facts and knowledge that you were sharing. So thank you. Thank you so much for jumping on and taking lead and doing the first part of the segment. We really appreciate it. Always great having you on for these
Awesome.
Sessions.
Everyone, I look forward to watching the rest of the event, and I'm going to save for the dance at the end.
No awesome. Thank you. Here, oh no, you have to come back on and do the dance.
All right. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. And Aniela, are you back on? Can you hear me?
I had to unmute myself there. Yes, I can hear you.
Okay,
We're
awesome. Great. Glad to have you back on. Well, now that we've had some whiskey and we've had some Guinness, it's definitely time to eat. So I am going to hand it back over to you and Chef Mark to go through our meal tonight.
I really appreciate your guys' patience, and I'm hoping this time we can make it work. I really enjoyed Mark's presentation about whiskey and Guinness. I have to say, I would consider myself to be a not aggressive or less aggressive whiskey drinker. So I'm really looking forward to trying Tullamore Dew. And I'm going to try that. I also did not know you could pair Guinness with oysters. Another fun fact I learned. And lots of great drunk fun facts too.
I didn't believe it until I tasted it myself, and that's amazing together.
Okay, well, I'm going to turn it back over to Chef Mark, and he'll take it from here.
Hey guys. So where was I? I was with the knife. So yeah, chef knife, got to keep it sharp, and the best way to do that is use a steel. I do it about 4 or 5 times a day. Really important to keep a knife sharp, and it's always important to keep the thumb away from the otherwise it could do this, and you don't want to lose your thumb.
Sorry. Hi, Chef Mark. You're a little bit out of focus right now.
All right, so a Mirepoix, like I said, it's there to add color, flavor, and clarify, and also to keep it from the bottom. So a Mirepoix is always just roughly diced, so it doesn't have to be perfect. As long as it's pretty much the same, because you want it to brown at the same rate and cook at the same rate. So, and the carrots, you don't need to peel them or anything like that. I don't. I just top and tail them, get rid of the tops on it. And again, just roughly chopped. Celery, the same thing. Just roughly chopped. Just like that. And then when you go through, you'll notice me wearing gloves, not wearing gloves. So gloves are only needed when you serving ready-to-eat food. So ready-to-eat food usually is cooked, but it can be raw as well. So basically, ready-to-eat food is I'm about to plate it. There's no further cooking, and I'm about to serve it to the guests or to yourself. So I take that. I got some bay leaves and some thyme in there. I have my little pan. I chuck that in, a little bit of oil. You want to get a color, as in, you know, when you color things, you caramelize your sugars. So the vegetables had sugar in it, so they caramelize, turns a bit sweeter, changes the flavor profile. So generally speaking, you always like to brown off your Mirepoix, unless you're making like a white stock where you don't need the color. Always add bay leaves to most things, dried bay leaves. You don't need a lot, 1 or 2 is usually fine. I add a bit of thyme. I just use dry thyme. So get that cranking. While that's sauteing off, I'm going to get my brined beef of brisket. So that's the, you can see it's changed a bit of color. So brine in the recipe, it's usually 6 parts water and then equal parts salt and sugar. And then I usually add some aromatic spices in there, but honestly, it's mostly the sugar and the salt that does the work. The salt breaks down the enzymes in the beef, so it makes it more tender. It also flavors the beef as well, and the sugar kind of offsets that. You don't want to have it hugely salty, right? So a lot of things get brined. I mean, bacon, you know, a lot of things we do brine. A lot of people brine chicken, especially if they're doing like a fried chicken. It just adds a bit more tenderness and a bit more flavor to it. I personally don't like to brine a lot of things unless it's something like this that's more traditional, just simply because you should be working with the natural ingredient, natural flavors coming out of the product. So that one there, we're going to seal, and oil. You can do this at home on your saute pan. I'm just doing it on my flat top just to save a bit of time. So you want to get a good color on it. Again, same kind of thing. Achieves 2 things when you sear things. It locks in the flavor or the natural juices of the product. I don't care if it's a fish, a beef, a pork, or a chicken, or whatever. It doesn't really make a difference. You need to lock in that all those natural juices in the product. If you just put it straight in without searing it, it's going to all the blood and all the juices and a lot of the flavor is going to leach out of the product. The second way you do it is, again, you caramelize the sugars in the meats, right? So you caramelize it, change it to different flavor. If you've not had like barbecue or anything like that, you can taste it if it's been on a char or it's been under coal or fire, same kind of thing. So you get a bit of, I always put the fat side down. There's no real reason I can think of, but yeah, always a fat side down, then you turn it over and you seal it. And when you're doing it too, a lot of people just sear the top and the bottom, but what you really want to do is sear all sides. So you want to seal all the sides of it. Well,
Chef Mark, we have a question.
sure.
How long do you brine the beef for?
It depends on the meat, but usually, you know, I'd say 48 hours is a good time frame. Again, chicken's a lot less. You can do chicken for like 4 or 5 hours, but this is a pretty dense product. It's pretty hard to penetrate, so you brine it a little longer. But usually I do it for 1 or 2 days. And again, depends on the size of the meat, the thickness of the meat. You know, it's all various, but you can tell. You can't really tell it because it's a raw product, but you know, per pound, you look. You know, if you're doing a pound of product, you're looking at about 1 or 2 days. And you can do it less, depending on how much you want to brine it for. You can do it for as little as 3 to 4 hours. So we're getting a good sear on it, making sure our Mirepoix doesn't catch on the bottom. And then what we're going to do, like I said, any braising of any meat always includes stock. So that stock is the moisturizing of it, so it doesn't dry out. And usually the general rule is if you're going to put stock in, the amount is just to cover maybe a third of the bottom. So you want to have a little bit sticking down at the top. That helps it continue to brown and to caramelize. So you don't want to immerse it fully in a bath of liquid. And the second thing that it does as well, it flavors the stock. So you take that finished product and you use that stock for any sauces you make. That's looking pretty good. So I got a pretty good sear on all sides there. Oop, there we go. So you want a good sear on everything. And all you need to do is just chuck it straight into the pot. So you can see through there, there's enough Mirepoix to cover the bottom so the beef doesn't touch the bottom of the pan or the roasting pan, whatever you're using. So that means it won't stick, it won't burn too much, will prevent it from burning. And what I like to do too is take that vegetables and puree it with the stock. It's not particularly traditional, but it adds that extra sweetness and the flavors from the onions, the carrots, and the celery. Put that on. Just use a simple beef stock. Like I said, you just want to cover it. I'll turn these bad boys back on to the potatoes. They're almost cooked already because obviously we had them sit in the water for about 20 minutes or so. So that's the amount of stock. So something looking like that. And then you want to put it in the oven. Just keep an eye on it so it's until you need to cover it. You don't want to caramelize it too much, but when you can start to see it brown up, cover with tin foil just to prevent it from getting too much color. I like to halfway through to flip it over so you get two sides, but always at the end finish with the fat side up. So the fat side up because you want to render that fat down. So over a period of time, that fat will slowly melt. It's a solid fat, so it'll take a long time to melt. You don't want to melt it all, obviously, because fat, unfortunately, is really good. It's just a fact that's never going to change. So you want to turn it up and down, but you always want to keep the fat side up. So I'll just get rid of that. All right. So potatoes are on. Again, I salt and water. That's all I do. Just put potatoes and salt. Next is my Brussels sprouts. I think everyone knows what a Brussels sprout is. So Brussels sprouts I like to do whole, and then I'll cut in half. They take a decent amount of time. A lot of people overcook them and they get all mushy. I like to have a wee bit of bite to it, not too much, but you really don't want to overcook it because then the outer leaves come really mushy and it's not quite the same. But before that, I'll chuck in the tomato. So like I was saying before, tomato concassate. Thing with tomatoes, if you're at the supermarket or shopping, wherever you want to go, usually the ones on the vines are the best because you still get the nutrition and sugar from the vines. And what you want to look for is the firm but super red, nice and red, not so firm, kind of in between soft and firm. And you should be able to. It's tough, but a really good tomato you want to smell. You should smell like a tomato. A lot of them don't because what happens is they pick them green and then they chuck them in a chuck and they gas them with a special gas that ripens them on the 12-day journey from Florida across to who knows where, you know. So I knew that because my last position, we did quite a big volume and I seen the whole process go through. So you really want to, if you want to go something really good, you really need to smell it. You know, they can artificially ripen it with bread. So it may look really nice, but it may not taste the same. So give it a good smell and it smells nice. Smells like it's harder, then it's a winner. So what we want to do here, typical concassate, very, very classical. You want to get rid of the core. The core is bitter, it's no good. It doesn't do anything for the dish. So get rid of that. You want to get it all the way into the white parts out. And then all you need to do is just make a small cross at the top. Okay, the reason why they're doing the cross is because you want to peel it off. And it won't peel if you don't cross it. So you cross out those. I'll probably need two, probably need one. Then what you need to do is put it into boiling water. Again, salt. Always use salted water. And then after that, you need to get a ice bath. So ice bath is water and ice. So as soon as you take it from the boiling water, you put it into ice bath, and you want to chill it down as quickly as possibly. Otherwise, we'll just overcook it and turn to mush. So you want to get it in and for about 20 seconds, depending how firm the tomato is, and then get it out and then peel it. So my water's almost done. All right, so I'm waiting for that water to boil. I got the cabbage, so it's very important to do your mise en place before any dish. So prepare the ingredients before you start cooking. So anything chopping, slicing, anything like that needs to be done before you start actually cooking. You know, in the kitchen, you'll find that, you know, countertops like this where you have it all prepared already, and then you start cooking element. You can't have a dish and then you chop your onion, chuck it in. Put your bacon, chuck it in. You need it all prepared and cut, and so it goes a lot quicker. So you want to get the cabbage as fine as possible. Again, I use my chef knife. For those who don't, who are not too familiar with a knife, most important part is you don't chop the fingers off. Sounds pretty obvious, but you know, I better say that. And you want to let the knife do the work. You don't want to try to push it through. You don't want to try to slap it through. You want to use the knife. It's a good knife. The knife will do most of the work. Most important thing is with your nails, you want to have your nails out. So if you do cut it, you hit your nails. You don't hit the skin. And again, you want to have a sharp knife. The worst thing you can do is cut yourself with a blunt knife. That's not fun. So if you do cut yourself, at least it's a clean cut. So you have your knives up like that, and basically you just rock it back and forth. So you tap the tip of your knife on the top, and then you rock back and forth. You want to get as fine as you can. And then when you get to a point where it's too high, then you just chop it. You want to try to get it as, if you can't get it thin, that's no big deal. Just try to get the same size. You know, if you want to do it thick, you can do it thick. Most important thing is really trying to get the same size. So the reason I say that is because you want to cook it evenly through the whole product. You've got a big chunk and then a small chunk. The small chunk will cook faster than the big one. It sounds obvious, but a lot of people don't know that. All right, so when you get your mise en place, what you do, you put it in a little container. So it's ready to rock and roll.
Here's a question for you, Chef Mark.
Sure.
Why is the water always salted?
It prevents discoloration, so it keeps the color of anything you do. So like broccoli, salt in, it'll keep it greener. Also flavors. And if the water, you don't need to add too much additional salt. So basically, the salt will penetrate the product more than just sprinkling it on top. So if you're cooking like a lot of seafood, a lot of chefs cook their seafood in salted water. It's just a more natural product to do, but yeah, to have it prevent color loss and also to flavor, to penetrate at the beginning. You don't really want to add salt at the end. You really want to add salt at the beginning because it's more of a kind of a natural through that goes through the product instead of just a salt on top. And so you need something that goes through the product. So the water's boiling, so I'll put that in. If Robin, give me an ice bath. So you need these, and then you need some tongs or a scoop or something close by to take it out of the tomato because you're not going to use your fingers. I'm not anyway. So I'll put these in. As I said, it won't take long, and it should be covered, which is not. So you can see I'm doing something wrong already, but I'll make it happen. You want to have it completely covered, not like this. I did it on purpose to show you not what to do. Yeah, it won't take long, depending how you see it start to crack. I don't know if you can see it or not, but you can see the tomato start to split. It will start to split quite heavily, and that's when you can take it off. Thanks, Robin. So that's an ice bath, water and ice. Again, just to cool the product down rapidly. Any vegetables you're going to blanch off, same thing. It prevents discoloration and it stops the cooking process. So a lot of the times we do in the kitchen and stuff, we blanch off broccoli, or whatever, because it's a short step. You don't want to have raw broccoli blanched off because it takes longer. So that's looking pretty close. You can see now starting to split the skin. See the skin starting to peel off. Like I said, this is quite a hard tomato, even though it's quite red, so it takes a bit longer. But you don't want the tomato to be cooked. You don't want it to be mushy. Most important thing. But you also want it easy enough to peel off. Otherwise, you'll be sitting there trying to peel the little bits and pieces off. So you can see that it's almost ready. You can see it starting to peel off from the tomato. I hope everybody understands me. I've got a funny accent, so that's the only way I can speak, so you've got to bear with me. So that's about right. You can see it already starting to peel off. So then you just put it in the ice bath. You don't want to have it in the ice bath too long because then it absorbs the liquid, and that's not a good thing. I don't know if I think I didn't tell you at the beginning, but yeah, any root vegetable, generally speaking, root vegetable, so a root vegetable underneath the ground, it's not above ground cooking. So most of the time, if you do that, general thumb is cook it from cold water. Anything above ground, you cook it from boiling water. So I put the potatoes in cold water, bring it to a boil. If it's something above ground like broccoli, then it should be boiled. It should be cooked from a boiling point. There's some cases where you don't have to, but generally speaking, that's the rule. And the reason for that is generally the ones above ground are lighter in texture, so they take quicker. They don't take very long to cook. The ones below ground are very dense. They take a long time to cook. So if you put it into boiling water, you cook the outside without cooking the inside. So that's, if you want to get it cold, that's about right, I think. So as I said, you don't want to have it there too long. So as you can see, when you do this, so you should be able to peel off. Oops. So you can see it coming off quite easy. Should just peel off the tomato and you should get something like this. Okay. Now, if you want to be fancy, you can keep the skin and fry it. It comes translucent. It's a really cool garnish. So I'll take that out, and then I'll chuck my Brussels sprouts in the water. Well, not many places have the actual fresh asparagus, Brussels sprout. They just have the little quick ones. So we add that. My spuds are cooking. All right. So what's next? All right, leek. Obviously potatoes. Leek, very Irish potatoes. Obviously, you know. So leek, I like to use the whites and the greens. It's a different flavor. So you take away even the most hard parts. And then I'll just cut it down the middle. The reason why I do that, sometimes there's dirt. Sometimes you see dirt in there. This is pretty clean, but sometimes in between the layers, you see a bit of dirt there. So it's always a good thing to wash it off. Nobody likes dirt in their food. Most of the vegetables over here are pretty clean, to be honest with you. Which I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. So clean that off. That's what I need. How we're doing on time?
I think you're doing good.
Now, being a chef, you always want to be on time. Most stressful thing about being a chef is getting anything on time. You got many types of deadlines. You know, hundreds of deadlines a day you have to get done. All right, so my leek, all I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut it straightly down. So again, with the hands and then the rocking motion. So you want to cut as thin as you possibly can. So you want to cut it pretty thin. There it is. Again, I'll put on my little container. My mise en place. All I do to check the potatoes is just squeeze it. Overcooked, not undercooked, obviously. But then also any mashed potatoes, two things that most people back on.
Back on.
All right, cool. So we got onion. You want to cut off the root side. There's no real trick to a simple few things that if an onion gets too strong and you start to cry. There's not really much. You can blow, you can whistle, you can put plastic wrap on your face, but end of the day, it's got to suck it up. So what I do for an onion, obviously it's layers. So you want to get small dice. So first you're going to vertically chop this way, as thinly as possible. Then you're going to do it this way, and then this way you slice it. So you get dices, right? So you start the same way, even you do nails down. This way, I don't rock it. I put it on the tip. So you can see. Go like this. And then what you want to do is cut it down the middle. A little bit on top. And then what will happen, you do it as fine as you can. And again, if you're at home, just cut it as fine as you can. Don't worry about it if it's not too fine. Only thing you need to do is just cook it out a bit longer. So that's what you're looking at. I'll do the same thing so we can show it again. And again, down the side. And obviously, if you want larger dice, you just make it bigger distance between the slices. Same thing with that, you just slice it. And you got finely diced red onions. It's important too to keep anything up. You always wipe your board down. Keeps the dishes from piling up at the end of the night too, so it's always a good idea. Again, I get my little container. You don't have to put it all in a container. You can put it on a plate or a little platter. You know, I just like containers. So you can see now the potatoes are going on pretty good. Still almost there.
Chef Mark, do you have any recommendations on good brands of chef knives that people should look at?
Yeah, I use Bustoff knives. I've had this since my college. And it will last me until I die and until I'm resurrected, and then I die again. It's going to last a long time. So it's a great knife, and the key thing is the handle a lot of the time. So a good quality knife will have rivets, 3 rivets, and a good quality knife will have the steel all the way through the handle. So you can see there, see the steel's all the way through. A cheaper knife will have that will stop here, and then that's where problems happen. The handle will fall off. And we'll pick it out. And then another one is you just should pick it up and be comfortable. Should be a forward balancing, you know, and it should have a bit of weight to it because again, the knife should do the work, not your hand or your arm. So you want a bit of weight to it. You want about this, but Bustoff or Trident. The Bustoff knife are the one with the Trident. You know the what do you call it? The god of the Trident. Whatever his name is. What is it? Aquaman. No. Well, you know, if I say Aquaman, it's gonna be right. But I like that. It's good German steel. They're reasonably priced, and that's what I've had most of my life. I got a global as well, but these are one usually for finer work. It's a finer blade, a thinner blade, so it's more for you wouldn't chop things on topping out. You do more like fish or something a bit more that needs a more delicate touch. So where was the onion? Conquest of tomatoes done. Right, parsley. So the old parsley. Just using regular parsley. I prefer to use Italian, but it doesn't make a difference. If you have herbs at home, I always put it in just a piece of paper, a wet piece of paper, and wrap them up and put them in the fridge. They'll last a lot longer. They'll be fresher when it comes out. It's just an easy way to do it. All your herbs, just wrap them in wet paper, put them in the fridge. Good to go. So the parsley too. Chop it finely as possible and then just bash it out by chopping as fine as you can. I can cut it pretty fine, but you guys at home might have to do it over a few times. So you want to squeeze it and get it as fine as possible. So keep on bundling it and squeezing it. The tighter it is, the finer you can cut it. Don't worry about the stalks. People cut the stalks off and stuff, but you know, if you cut it fine enough, it doesn't really matter. And there's flavour in the stalks as well, especially when you're talking about the cilantro or coriander. I always use the stalks here because it's there's a lot of flavour there. And especially if you're cooking it out, you're not going to, I mean, it's not too much of a difference. It's got a bit of salt. So you want to get pretty fine, but again, don't worry about getting it too fine. Don't worry about getting it too chunky or unfine. So then you're going to go through, put your left hand or your right hand on the blade, and then what you're going to do is you're going to rock it around. Just get it as fine as possible. If you're really finicky, you can put in some muslin cloth and wash it off. But I'm not going to do that. That's fine. Then we get another wee container. I'll get him a smaller container. It's parsley, dry, and I actually use when it's dried like this. I don't chop it. I just use the stems. So it's done. Brussels sprouts. I'll get my onions, so I don't want to waste. All right, and this one, you just want to slice it. Again, most important part of it is to get it as even as possible. Don't worry about thick or thin. Just try to get it even. All right, so that's the onion. In the container. Oh. Onion for that. All right, bacon. All right, so I'm using, it's called Irish bacon over here, or in New Zealand, we call it bacon. Most of Europe, most of the countries use this type of bacon. So this is a shoulder bacon. So it's part of the loin and the back cap, the fat cap. So you've seen it in the supermarket as a big loin of pork, right? So it's similar to that. Over here, for some reason, they take the fat cap off. So there's a wee bit on the side there. I don't know if you can see it. So that's a bit of fat. So this one here, especially if you travel and you see this and sandwiches and breakfast and you think it's ham, it's not. It's bacon, and it's not supposed to be crispy. It's supposed to be just cooked. You can't christen this because it's too much meat. Same way, sun cured, smoked, whatever you want to say. Right? So then we're going to make lardons, which is another very classical terminology. Basically means it's a cut. And again, I wouldn't worry about the size as long as it's even. So you're going to cut it through about like that. So we cut that up, and this is going to be for the Brussels sprouts. Bacon is always good on anything, pretty much. I think you're going to agree with me there. Bacon in. Chopping board. And then what I want to do is add a bit more rosemary. And that's pretty much it for the Brussels sprouts. Right, so we get back to the potatoes. Yep, it's pretty good. So we're going to drain this off and then let it sit for about 2-3 minutes. And you can poke it. I can do it by touch. I can feel it, and it's good. We'll do it. I'll put it up. So it's a wee bit squishy, but not too squishy. And the Brussels sprouts too. Just when you come back here. So then next up, we'll make the mashed potatoes. Again, mashed potatoes we can hold. You know, we're going to use cream. And we're going to use butter. We're going to use the leek. and use cabbage. So what we're going to do, I'm going to take the pot, I'm going to saute it off. I'll do it now. We can add mashed potatoes. So again, a bit of oil. Doesn't matter on this press, you know, olive oil, canola oil, you know, when you're doing this stuff, it doesn't really matter, to be honest with you. You won't tell the difference. So we're going to start with the most cooked, what takes the most time. And the most time is Leeks. Hot. Then get it in. And what you're going to do with the Leeks, you're going to so sauteing with color. To sweat something, you cook it without color. So you want to have a low heat and you want to cook it out, right? So I always add salt when you come over like this. Breaks down the food. It helps it cook quicker. Add a bit of salt to it and it breaks it down, right? We have the leek. And then next, what will go in will be the cabbage. So cook that up. And at the same time, I'm going to get another pan. Push it through, yeah. Maybe I'll put it on here. Oopsie daisy. There we go. So I took that off, then you're going to chuck the onions in it, and then you're going to chuck the Brussels sprouts. And again, this one doesn't have to be crispy. Just cooked out. And then we'll take this off. I was going to do a portion up, so I won't do all of them. I'll just do a few of them, just for the sake of plating. Right. So there's that. And all we need to do with that, I got my little shredded knife, just because I like using it. Just going to cut it in half. I like to char it. You can do it in the same pan, but since I've got a nice flat top here, I'm going to use a flat top. So what you want to do is you put it on a hot pan and you want to char it. So you want to get a decent amount of color. So there it's coming down nicely. So now I'm going to add the cabbage to this. So you want to get, you can feel it too. You can kind of see it. It's a bit limper. You can feel that it's a bit cooked. We're going to add your cabbage. Again, this is going to go through your mashed potatoes, right? And you'll be surprised the cabbage will cook down. That's about good. That stage for if you're using this type of bacon. Even if you're not using this type of bacon, American bacon, once you go through, is fine because it's a lot of fat in it. That's when you want to add your onions. This time you don't need to add salt. There's enough salt and oil in the bacon already. And then when it dries out, you add a little bit of bacon fat. Just gives it a nice flavor to it. Same with the Brussels sprouts. I'm going to put a little bit of bacon fat on it because, like I said in the beginning, bacon tastes really good. Mr. Mashy. Put on the beach, on the table. I don't know if you can see the color on this, but I'll show it to you if you can't. All right, so you're looking at there, it's quite nice. You know, you get a nice, I don't like to overcook my onions. I like a bit of bite to it. You can see the cabbage. Now you can see now the cabbage is starting to sweat down. All right. Starting to come down, starting to come down. Will help with this on. There we go. On the grill, you put it on a saute pan, you put it on your barbecue, and then all you need to do is just chuck it in. Those little puppies can sit there for 5, 6, 7 minutes. No problem. Then we get back to our cabbage. So for the sake, I'll just move this across here so you can see it. Right, so green. Oops, there it is. I use heavy cream because why not, right? So I put some heavy cream in there, chuck in your butter. And again, the ounces, I think it was 4 ounces we put. But again, you can put as much as you like. You never put too much butter, you only can put too little. And then use my stirrer. All right, so what I like to do, I have this again. It's important to keep the mashed potatoes hot, right? So I'm heating up the cream and the potato and the butter together. And I'm going to add my salt. And this time I'm going to add a bit of salt. I'm going to add my Maldon salt. This is an English salt. It's one of the best salts you can get. It's a chef salt. Really good. You can see the flexures and stuff. I add a bit of the salt to it. And then I'm going to add, stir that around. It's almost melted together. You don't want it boiling. You don't need to. You just need to warm it up. And again, warm all the time. Mashed potatoes needs to be consistently warm to work. And now I'm going to chuck my leek and cabbage mixture straight in. And then going to give it a stir around. There's my mashed potatoes. So you got a nice creamy, leaky, cabbagey kind of thing, right? Up the heat. I'm going to chuck the mashed potatoes inside. You can see, I don't know if you can see, but you can see how it's pretty dry. All right, so it's not a wet one. It's quite dry because we dried it off. And then you're just going to mix it in. And you want to beat it. Don't be shy about it. And as much cream as you want. And as a chef, you always taste. Pretty good. Yep, I think I'll leave that actually. So as potatoes done, and again they'll keep warm. You got the asparagus, the Brussels sprouts, a lot of bacon. So those are the two products. You have those already, right? So the last thing we want to do is the sauce. Sauce. All right. So we got. Let me double check. So you want to cut off your onions. Remember the onion, finely cut onions we got. A little bit of oil. A little bit of onion. And again, a little bit of salt because you're cooking it off, right? You get that cranking. And then you add a bit of garlic. Then I got my sauce already here. So this is just the gravy from the brisket, right? So whatever you left over, you have, you use the gravy from the brisket. So control the heat, cook it off. You can see there it's almost already done. And you get your cream ready. I like to add a little bit of the hard herb. So I put a little bit of the rosemary in there. Just while it's cooking. And I'm going to add the stock. Okay. You want to reduce that down. In French, it's demi-glace. So it's a stock reduced by half. Demi in French is half, obviously. So you want to get it up and boiling. And then once that's finished, you want to add your cream, your half and half, sorry, and your parsley. And then finally, at the last minute, you add your concassate. Okay. So I'll get ready to plate up. I like to use kind of bowls, personally. So I like to use a bowl. We're going to put the mashed potatoes down first. on the same kind of thing, I like to just put it in, really slap it on the bottom. Get a good healthy portion on there. Because who doesn't like mashed potatoes, right?
I know I love it, Chef Mark.
And
Although
then
yours look way better than mine at working out.
where do you want to do? You put the Brussels sprouts around. Make sure we get plenty of bacon in there. Because bacon is, like we discussed, good. Plenty of green. So you get a nice green color to it as well. I like to add a little bit of fat too. So a little bit of juice there. All right, if you come back over here, you can see it's boiling. You can see it's reduced, right? You can see what that does is it intensifies the flavor. So it makes it a lot more stronger flavor. And at this stage, when you juice it again by half, you add your cream. Add a little bit of cream. And then you want to boil that. Otherwise, it won't emulsify. So what I mean by emulsify, that means it sticks together, all right? So anything, dairy products especially, may split. The fat separates from the liquid. So what you want to do is you need a binding agent, and the binding agent is a reduction. So it's a reduction that holds fat better. So if you do that, and after that, you should just boil a little bit. Quite creamy, but not a beef sauce or a red wine sauce for a chicken. And then last minute, what you want to do is you add your tomatoes and you add your parsley. Okay, so you can see here it's boiling. You can see too, it's got a nice consistency. Boil it down for 2 more seconds. Okay, we're good. I'm happy with that. I'll chuck in my tomatoes. I'll turn off the sauce, and I'll chuck in my parsley. Okay, so you see that, and now it comes quite a nice, rich, kind of thick, kind of creamy gravy, right? All right, and then all we need to do now is take out your brisket. Take out the brisket, and there it is. So I'm going to use this piece of brisket. You can see I did that because you can see it. It's almost falling apart. You can see that it's quite tender. And then, so you want at that stage. It takes again a few hours. You really can't define the hours because it depends on the size, the meat, the cut. There's a lot of difference in there. So you want to slice it quite large pieces. And again, your portion size can be up to you. You can see it's quite tender. It's quite fatty. It's quite juicy. And you just want to put that on top. And just for good measure, we'll do another one. It's a bit of knife that actually cuts. So you can see it's quite tender. It pulls apart. All right, so we got that on top. And then we get back to our sauce. You can see the sauce there. And we're just going to ladle it on top. So it's quite creamy, quite thick, really strong in flavor because we reduce it down with the cream. And heaps of sauce. Don't be shy of the sauce. And that's where you got the end. And so there you have seared corned beef, calcannon potatoes, baked Brussels sprouts, Gaelic sauce.
That is amazing.
Do you want to get Nico for the?
So
Nico. Oh, you're up. Oh, yeah. Oh, sorry, mate. Oh, yeah, sorry, mate.
now we're going to try to redo the dance demonstration that some of you might have missed when we cut out. We understand if you have to leave, but if you can stick around for this demo, I promise you won't regret it.
Here he comes. Yep.
Yeah. Here we go, Father. Before I get on the plane.
Yeah, yeah.
I love it. Thank you, Nico.
Are we allowed to clap after this? That was fantastic.
Yes, go right ahead, Candace.
Thank you, Nico.
Oh, you
All
like
right,
it?
Anya,
I think, yeah.
Aniela, do you want to take us out? I'm going to share my screen for you.
Wow, that's good. What time is that? All right.
Ah, yes,
Thank you,
braised.
everybody, for spending your Friday night with us and for your patience here.
Nika.
Once again, we're at Sip and Savor on Fort Apache here. See, it's amazing
So-
work
cheers, yeah,
done
yeah.
by Chef Mark. I hope that you
Cheers,
will
mate.
follow
Cheers.
all of our
Thanks for the pie.
events
Oh, no
on
worries,
social
anytime, man.
media that are listed on the slide,
Exactly, yeah.
particularly Rebel Restaurant Week, which I know you will love. Thanks again, everybody, and have a great weekend.
Which is south.
Thank you everyone for joining us as well, and sorry for all of the technical difficulties, but thank you for sticking it through with us, and I hope you enjoyed this episode, and hopefully we see you for some of our events in the upcoming months. We have the Spring Swing Virtual Golf Tournament from April 17th to April 25th, Rebel Restaurant Week from May 17th to May 23rd, and our celebration graduation Cook Like a Rebel and Salud Prost chairs on June 15th. So stay tuned for all of those events and how to register. And we will see you all again soon. Have a great Friday evening, Friday night, and fantastic weekend. Bye, everyone.